Before we get started, I just wanted to say that just like every other topic that I've covered on this channel and in these videos, I am not a Linux expert. I don't claim to be one. I'm pretty much just a beginner. Linux is really just something that I'm passionate about and want to share with some other people. So I just want to say that because I'm not an expert, you may find some information here to be partially incomplete, dramatically oversimplified, or even just straight up incorrect. I did write it to the best of my abilities, but just please remember this and continue at your own risk. I'm pretty late to the party. Try as I might, making these videos is a much slower process than I would like it to be, but Windows 10 went end of life on October 14th, I believe, of 2025, and because of that, it's not going to get any more security updates. You are not really supposed to keep using it. It also means that if you have not yet upgraded to Windows 11, Microsoft is going to start pushing you really hard to do that. There are a number of reasons that you might not want to upgrade to Windows 11. We're going to touch on those a little bit later, but regardless of what you want to do, you really only have a couple of options. You can choose to update to Windows 11. Of course, this is the easiest option. It's the one that makes the most sense to most people, but it might also require you to update to an entirely new computer, thanks to some hardware specifications that Microsoft requires. You can continue using Windows 10 by paying $30 to Microsoft to get continued security updates. This is going to go up and up every year, and it's really only delaying the inevitable. I think you can only do it for 3 years at most. You can keep using Windows 10 without paying for it and without getting any security updates in return. This is not a good idea. I would not recommend that. Or you can go with my favorite option, the one that this video is clearly about if you read the title and looked at the thumbnail. You can switch to a different operating system. You can switch to an alternate operating system, specifically Linux. I decided that I wanted to make this video because Linux has been something that's been like really interesting, something that I'm very passionate about as of late, and with the end of Windows 10, I just wanted to share it with some people. I feel like people tend to have this idea that Linux is a very hard to learn operating system that's only like for like tech wizards and people that code and program with their free time, and they're perfectly happy spending an entire hour just trying to get their computer to turn on before they can even use it. Because of this, I feel like it has this image of just being like generally unfit for use of the public. And that's only if they have any idea of what Linux is in the first place, because I feel like at least in my life, almost nobody even knows about it. This is why I wanted to make this video, because I want more people to know about it. Most videos that you find, at least in my experience when I was switching to Linux myself, are going to be operating under the assumption that you know what Linux is, that you know that you want to use it, and that you know what they are talking about. Oh, I should turn off my Discord pings, probably. Sorry, I'm going to go see the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie later. I'm very excited, and I had to just tell one of my friends the time that I think we're going at. This isn't that video. I want to make something for normal, everyday people that might not even know what Linux is in the first place. Another thing to keep in mind going forward in this video is that it is deeply rooted in my own perspective and experiences. I am the one that wrote it. It only makes sense for it to be that way. But I am a person that has been using Windows for as long as I've been using computers, pretty much. It's the first operating system that I used. It's the operating system that I grew up using. And it's the operating system that I learned that I love computers with. That being said, I've, for the most part, decided to step away from it as much as I can, to stop using it. Just the other day, I actually completely deleted my Windows partition. I freaked out a little bit, and I'm a little bit scared going forward, but I love using Linux. And a lot of people are going to be a little bit confused by that, but my hope is that in watching this video, you'll kind of learn from my experiences and kind of see where I'm coming from. I'm sure that you've also noticed that this is quite a long video, and because of that, it is broken into different chapters. If you are on YouTube or Tilvids, feel free to skip and scrub between them. You can find links in the description to the different chapters, or I'm pretty sure on PeerTube as well, you can just scrub through it in the timeline itself and kind of jump around, see where you're at, and see what you want to watch specifically. And now that that is all out of the way, let's get into the bulk of the video. What's up? It's a different day. My hair looks different. The shirt I'm wearing is different. My walls are bare and I'm in the middle of moving. Don't worry about it. So before we actually dive into switching to an entirely different operating system, the first thing that I want to talk about is why you might not even want to use Windows 11 in the first place, or at least a few of the reasons why I decided I don't really want to use Windows 11 anymore. If a lot of this feels like an attack on Microsoft directly, that's because I'm going to be so real. It kind of is. I have a little bit of bias for sure. I was not always a big hater of Microsoft and Windows as a whole. I was actually quite a big fan. I've been using Windows for as long as I can remember, pretty much, as long as I've been into computers. It's the operating system that I grew up using at home and in school. It's what I would make crappy gaming content when I was 12 years old about like Roblox or whatever. I would use it in both my high school and college classes. I would use it as a gamer. I would use it to make these videos up until now. And I was even like deeply integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem the same way that like diehard Apple users are. This is my second Surface device. It might not even be my last, honestly. I like the hardware that they make a lot. OneDrive would be like my cloud storage provider of choice, and I would still use it on occasion even now. I even daily drove Edge as like my main web browser for like a whole year. Like everybody point and laugh at me, make fun of me, I know. Basically what I'm trying to say is that probably for like the past decade of my life, I've used a Windows computer at least like once every day because I'm a computer guy. I use computers a lot. But then I learned about some crappy things that Microsoft does as a business that I don't 100% agree with. I learned that Linux was a pretty viable choice for a desktop operating system, and I just thought to myself like, hey, maybe Windows just isn't for me, you know? So yeah, I am somebody that switched from Windows to Linux out of frustration and disappointment mostly, and I might be airing out a bit of a grudge, but I did try to keep everything very honest and very accurate to the best of my abilities in this section going forward. But just keep in mind, I'm definitely biased. So first, let's talk about planned obsolescence. Windows 11 introduced some pretty strict hardware requirements. In order to run the operating system, you need what is called a TPM 2.0 chip. If you don't know what that is, it basically just lets you enable some hardware-backed security things like secure boot, encryption, biometric unlock, things like that. Things that are nice to have security-wise, but are definitely not like 100% necessary, right? Your computer will still be completely functional without these things. You'll still be able to like use the raw power of Windows 11 or whatever, even if you don't have those things unlocked, except for Microsoft won't let you use Windows 11 without those things unlocked. If you don't have the TPM 2.0 chip or the hardware responsible for enabling these things, that's fine. Your computer will still be very, very capable. But what I find very interesting is that this TPM 2.0 standard was not introduced until November of 2019. And if you're sitting there thinking to yourself like, wow, November of 2019 was not that long ago, then you would be absolutely correct. Sorry to barge in here, I just need to correct something real quick. When I was reading through the TPM Wikipedia page, I misunderstood this line to mean that November of 2019 was when TPM 2.0 was released, but I was incorrect. It was actually just a revision to the documentation. The technology itself was actually introduced back in 2014, but it wasn't really standard on all computers until around 2018 or 2019. So that's an oopsie, but even with this error, I still think the point stands. Pardon me, I'm going to read this part off of my screen real quick just to make sure I get the numbers right, but there was a survey done by landsweeper.com with over 30 million Windows computers, and it was reported that only 52.55% of devices met that TPM 2.0 requirement. If we just like round that down a little bit to 50% to make the math a bit easier, then we know that there's like roughly 15 million Windows computers that are not going to meet that requirement, and honestly might just end up being e-waste in a landfill somewhere. It doesn't matter if they were perfectly usable for normal everyday computing tasks. It doesn't matter if they could run the software of Windows 11 itself. Microsoft is not going to let you upgrade. Imagine if you built like a top-of-the-line, very expensive gaming rig in like October of 2019, and now you just can't use your computer anymore because you can't upgrade to Windows 11 and you're going to be like a security liability. It's not like computers from around that time are like so old that they just don't work at all, right? Like they can still be very, very capable machines. You could still do good stuff with those machines. But unless you're willing to just take a risk and continue running Windows 10 or switch to a different operating system, you're just out of luck. That's going to suck for you, right? You're going to have to buy a whole new computer to use Windows 11. This is a prime example of what's called planned obsolescence. It's like a conspiracy theory, or more like a pseudo-conspiracy theory, because it's definitely just real, basically describing the idea that some products are either artificially limited or just designed to completely fail after a certain amount of time so that you're forced to get a new one. If you think back to like a couple of years ago when I was in like junior high and everybody was just talking about like, oh, Apple slows down their old iPhone so that you have to buy a new one. It's basically that. So by putting these requirements in place, it is evident that Microsoft will be forcing a lot of people to buy entirely new computers. This will then in turn sell more licenses for their software, or with them pushing more and more that Surfaces are the greatest, most best ideal way to experience their operating system, they're just going to be getting a bunch more money, right? Behavior like this is incredibly anti-consumer. If you ask me, you should be able to use the things that you own, right? Like this computer is physically in my space. I'm holding it in my hands, whatever. I should be able to use it even if I can't run Windows 11 because of some stupid requirement that I don't meet. I just don't think that you should have to buy an entirely new computer just because some company worth $4 trillion wants me to buy a new one so that they can have a little bit more of my money. That's my washing machine. It just finished. I need to go move that. Especially if what you have is already working just fine. I just find this to be like completely, utterly ridiculous, right? Like if you're already running a machine that's a bit older and you were already thinking of upgrading anyways, then like, sure, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you. But some of us have hardware that's still completely functional for what we need it to do. It can do everything that we need just fine. We just can't run Windows 11 because of this stupid requirement that we don't even need. My second point is that Windows 11 is full of ads, and I just don't really feel like it respects me as a user. Did I already clap? I don't remember if I did. There's another one for you. So something that you might not often think about if you are somebody that just like buys pre-built computers from Dell or HP or laptops or whatever is that Windows is not a free operating system. The price of the operating system license is always just included in the price of whatever machine you're buying, but if you are somebody that is like building your own computer, or you're just for whatever other reason buying a Windows license by itself, it's going to run you $139 US. That's not super cheap, but honestly, like paying for software, especially something like an operating system that allows you to use your computer and all of the other software that is on it, is not unreasonable. That's fine. But I do think that filling your operating system full of ads so that you can continue profiting off of your customers after they already paid you is entirely unreasonable. That's nuts. I know that advertisements aren't really a big deal to a lot of people and that they don't really bother a lot of people, but they certainly bother me, and I'm sure that they bother some of you. Of course, Windows 10 also had ads. I don't think anything before that really did, but the ads in Windows 11 are like invasive almost. Like they make me feel like uncomfortable. So if you just bought a brand new Windows 11 machine or a brand new install of Windows 11 on your computer, you're going to open the start menu. You're going to find a bunch of random software pinned in your start menu. It's going to be stuff like Netflix, Snapchat, WhatsApp, whatever. Stuff that I don't really care about. Maybe you care about it, but it's just pinned right there just so that you can easily download it with one click and start using their service. And they absolutely paid to be there. I don't know about you, but I don't really care to use any of that stuff. If I were going to, I'd probably just do it in my web browser anyways. So I usually take the time to right click and remove every single one of them. I can't stand the idea of just like having random stuff in my start menu on my desktop, whatever, and just having a messy system. So that's something that's quite important to me. But what drives me crazy is that, a little bit of time will pass. I open my start menu. That stuff is back again, this time pinned under the recommended section. If you're a normal person that's not already using OneDrive like I am, you'll get ads for OneDrive in your File Explorer under their recommended section. And this isn't even talking about just the random straight up pop-up ads that you get saying like, do you want to pay $1 for 3 months of Game Pass on Xbox? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And these, yes, are really ads in your paid operating system. But what I think is even worse than that, like this just absolutely drives me up the wall, makes me furious, is when Windows just skips doing any advertising or anything like that and just installs random bloat software to my computer directly without even asking me. With this part, I'm specifically thinking about Copilot. I got this laptop before Copilot was introduced. Thank goodness I don't have that stupid, ugly Copilot key. But I remember when they announced it and released it, and I was like, wow, I'm never going to use that. And then I updated my computer, Copilot was installed, whatever, I got rid of it. I didn't want it. But then another update rolls around or something like that, and Copilot is just back. It's just back. It's installed on my computer again. I didn't want it to, and it was right back there, pinned in my taskbar again. It just made me so mad. I never instructed my computer to do this. I never said, hey, I want Copilot, because I would never say that. It just did it anyways. And then I would have to go back and remove it again. But then the next time I update, there it is again. And it just keeps coming back. And I just don't want this. Continuing on the topic of random AI-powered computer garbage, let's talk about Recall. There's a dog outside. I don't know if you can hear him. He sounds cute. So if you haven't ever heard of Recall before, somehow it was in the news a while ago because it's just so insane what this is. It's a new AI-powered feature that Microsoft is planning on introducing to every computer that runs Windows 11. It's supposed to act kind of as like a memory for your computer and all the stuff that you do on it. It does this by basically taking a screenshot every time it detects something changing on your computer, scanning that screenshot with AI to kind of figure out what you were doing, and then the idea is that you can kind of chat with Copilot and say hey, what's that mini golf game show that I was reading about? It'll be able to say, oh, of course, you're talking about Holy Moly. I think you're also supposed to be able to look at a timeline of these screenshots so that you can kind of look back at what you've been doing over the past little while and then kind of jump back in time to whatever thing you were doing that you want to keep doing. It sounds like kind of a cool idea, I guess. I can like see how it could potentially be useful. I don't think I need it, but maybe some people do. But you should 100% have a bunch of red flags going off, because this is a huge privacy concern. You might have this kind of mentality that you don't really have anything to hide. Why should you worry about something like this? But let me just put it this way for a second. Think about it like this. We use our computers to do a lot of like really sensitive stuff these days. We use our computers for pretty much everything. We do like online banking. We do filling out of paperwork for our employers and stuff with our like very personal private information, like our social security numbers and stuff like that. We put all of our passwords in for every website, and we have very private conversations with friends and family that we wouldn't necessarily want to share with other people. All of this private stuff, all of this very sensitive stuff, all of it is going to be screenshotted, recorded, and archived by this tool. Microsoft says that all of this information, all of this archiving, whatever, is going to be stored locally on your device. But from the same company that is worth $4 trillion and yet is forcing you to buy a new computer so that they can have just a little bit more of your money, do you really believe that? Because this could be very profitable for them if they used it. Even if it's just starting off as all of this being privately, locally stored on your machine, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay that way. Microsoft could very nonchalantly just update their privacy policy or terms and conditions, those things that we all read. And then with like one click of a button saying, yep, I agree, everything will just be uploaded to their servers, right? If they're able to watch everything that you do essentially and have access to all of that information, they're going to be able to build crazy accurate advertising profiles off of you, off of your friends, off of everybody that's using a Windows computer. And then they can sell that to advertising companies and just keep making a billion, bajillion dollars. Not to mention that if this data were stored on Microsoft servers, it would make them a huge target for cyber attacks and hackers. And then if anybody were able to successfully breach those defenses that they have in place, it would be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, data breach that we've ever seen. It would be so dangerous. But maybe it is true. Maybe everything will just stay, completely locally stored on your machine and Microsoft won't ever see it. But even if that was the case, it still wouldn't be super safe because, imagine if somebody just like stole your laptop or broke into your house and stole your computer. Like, the chances of that happening aren't super likely, but stuff like that does happen. Even if your devices are encrypted or have other security measures in place, there are ways to get around those, and then people can just practically steal your identity with one theft of your backpack with your laptop in it or something. But of course, I do have a really big tinfoil hat on right now. This is all hypothetical, but I'm just trying to put in perspective how dangerous this could be if it is mishandled. And all of these issues kind of combined are leading into like my biggest issue that I'm having, which is I just feel like I made this mistake of feeling like, I paid like $1,400 for this laptop to some random guy on eBay and I bought it. It's mine. But I feel like I'm making the mistake thinking that it is mine instead of thinking that it's Microsoft's. This is just Microsoft's laptop that they're just letting me borrow, It's starting to just feel more and more like this operating system that I'm using isn't for me to use it. It's just for Microsoft to profit off of me. It just feels like we keep getting further and further away from Windows just letting us do what we want with our computers, and it feels honestly more like Windows is actively working against us sometimes, at least to me. And whether you're with me and you agree with all of this stuff that I'm feeling, or you're just a little bit curious about the other options that you have, let's finally introduce the solution that this video is all about, Linux. So first of all, what even is Linux, right? Maybe you're not super familiar with what it is. To explain this, first I'm going to start with a pretty weird metaphor. You're going to have to bear with me a little bit here. So imagine that your operating system that you use on your computer is like a hamburger, right? Where all the toppings are the programs, apps, and settings that it comes with. In this metaphor, we're going to pretend like Microsoft is this big, crazy, fancy restaurant that's promising that they're going to give you the best burger you've ever had. Like, that sounds amazing, right? The problem is that at this restaurant, they only have the one burger. It's only one burger. You can't modify it in any way, and it costs $139. And, they'll update it every now and then. They'll move some things around. The burger will look a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's still just the same unchangeable $139 hamburger. Some people really like this burger, and that's fine. They like the toppings that come on it, and they just swear it is the best burger that money can buy. That's fine. That's perfect. But man, if you don't really like pickles, or you want to add bacon, or you're just confused by why this burger is, powered by AI or whatever, you're just out of luck. The chef at this restaurant is not very accommodating. And at the end of the day, it's a pretty good burger. Like, it's passable. But unless you like all of the toppings that they give you and you don't really mind not being able to customize it, then you're going to have this thought in the back of your mind, like, I could probably get a better burger somewhere else. Linux, on the other hand, is like a smaller local burger shop, and they've got a menu that is just truly astounding with the number of burgers on there. It's got to be like thousands. They've got like so many different burgers with so many different combinations of toppings and sides. Like, if you just take the time to look a little bit, you're bound to find something that is perfect for you. Plus, they will let you modify anything that you want. If you don't like tomatoes, you can take them off. If you want to add cheese, you can add cheese. If you want to choose the specific type of cheese, you can do that. And if you know your way around the kitchen, they'll even just let you make your own burger for yourself with whatever you want. This is really the only burger shop in town where you are going to find something that is just perfect for the kind of burger that you enjoy. And the very best part of this burger shop is that almost every burger on the menu is completely free. Not because it's like low quality or shady or sketchy or anything like that, no. But because these people are just making burgers for the love of the game. They just love making burgers. They love sharing this with people. And they might not charge you for it, but they'll definitely have like a little tip jar, and you can support them if you want to. If you're getting a little bit lost in this burger metaphor, we're going to take it back to reality real quick. We're going to make it make sense. So this is what Linux is. This is how it works. It's not just one operating system necessarily. It's like a whole menu of operating systems, each with its own different flavor, its own different purpose. We call these different operating systems distributions, or just distros for short. A lot of the most popular distributions are meant for just like general use. They're good for like work and productivity, browsing the web, stuff like that. But some of these distributions, or again, distros for short, were made with specific use cases in mind. Things like gaming, or some of them are made for privacy and security. Some of them are made for creative work. All of these different distributions or burgers, whatever, were made because Linux is an open source operating system. So anybody can look at the code, they can see how it works, they can make a copy of it and make it fit what they want it to do. This is how all of these different, like thousands of distributions came to be made, and why there's still new ones being made all the time. So I've already pretty well established that Windows kind of pushed me to explore different operating systems because of a lot of problems that I had with it, and I'm happy to report that most of, if not all of the issues that I talked about, and even ones outside of this video that I have, are fixed by Linux. Linux does not have any of these hardware requirements that Windows is pushing now, and it's incredibly lightweight, especially with the help of some specific distros. Even like 10-year-old hardware, or even older than that, can feel like brand new with Linux. Microsoft might be telling you that your computer is like too old, it's outdated, it's not good enough to be used anymore, and you just throw it away and get a new one. But instead of doing that, instead of running to buy a new machine or throwing your old one out, why not just give Linux a go? Your hardware is probably still perfectly usable, and Windows honestly might even be holding it back. Linux is really going to let you like unleash the hidden power that your computers have. I think that sounds a little cheesy, but it's very true. Even older hardware, or just something that is just not quite compatible with Windows 11, is going to be given a second chance, a second life with Linux. What I appreciate even more about Linux is that I really feel like it respects me as a user, a lot more than Windows does, at least. Linux is never going to randomly install a bunch of AI garbage that you don't care about. It's not going to fill your operating system full of ads. At most, you're going to get like a little pop-up when you first install asking you to donate to the program. But guess what? You can close it, and you'll never see it again. When I run Linux, the only programs that I have on my computer are the ones that I want to be there, and nothing else. I don't have Copilot randomly showing up repeatedly. I don't have some random web browser that I don't want to use installed on my computer that I can't uninstall, even though I did use Edge for a while. Linux even lets you be the one in charge of choosing when you update your operating system. Gone are the days of like just trying to restart your computer quickly, only having to wait 30 minutes for it to do an update that you didn't even know it was going to do. You can update whenever you want on your own time, and if you prefer auto updates, you can just turn those on too. And of course, since it is an operating system that is not Windows, recall isn't here and never will be. But that's kind of a given. The
The main thing here is that I really trust Linux to stay very respecting of me and my privacy, largely due to its open source nature. If anyone tries to implement something shady into the code, it will be identified and fixed very quickly because it's open source. Anybody can look at it, and the whole many eyes thing. And if the distribution as a whole is going in a direction that I don't really agree with or like, I can just easily switch to a different distribution or try to fix it myself even if I really wanted to. And I just don't really think that you can get that kind of security or control anywhere else pretty much. If that doesn't quite have you convinced, let's talk about some other benefits that Linux brings. The first thing that I want to talk about here is, again, just how incredibly lightweight Linux is as an operating system. It's not just great for breathing new life into hardware that's just old enough to be deemed unfit for Windows 11, but even older stuff like Windows 7 era devices can run buttery smooth, they're brand new, even with some modern distributions. With the help of some specialized Linux distributions, you can even get Windows XP era devices running again. Hardware like this is dang near prehistoric, but with the help of a distribution like Puppy Linux, it can absolutely still run. This is possible just because of how dang lightweight it is, especially when compared to Windows. Because of this, everyday normal use will feel a lot smoother a lot of the time. Linux isn't running any random software in the background that you don't recognize like Windows is. Because of that, it has a lot more power to just focus on the things that you, the user, are actually doing. If you have a computer or a laptop that sounds like it's going to fly away with how hard the fans are going just when you open a web browser, Linux might be able to help with that. Linux is also a great operating system for gaming, and it just continues to get better and better in this area every day. According to the website ProtonDB, 90% of the 1,000 most popular games on Steam are playable on Linux, often with equal or even better performance than you would get on Windows. This boost in performance, if any, is often completely negligible and not even noticeable, but in some cases, it can be a huge bump. So if you're the kind of person that really just wants to squeeze every ounce of performance, every frame per second that you can out of your machine, looking into Linux might be worth it for you. Another thing that I really like about Linux is just how easy it is to find, install, and update all of the software that I use. So when you want to install a program on Windows, that oftentimes means that you have to open your web browser, go to Google, search up the program that you want to download, find the right installer, run the installer, click next a whole bunch of times, and then and only then can you use the software that you want to use. And if your software doesn't run auto updates, you're going to have to do that again every time you want to update the software. That's a pain in the butt. On Linux, the process is very different, and luckily for you, much, much simpler. Most popular Linux distros are going to include something called a software center. That's basically going to act almost like an app store. It's going to be like the Microsoft Store on Windows, except for you'll actually want to use this. It'll allow you to browse, search for, download, update all of your software, just like the App Store on your phone. The things that are available in your software center are going to differ between different distros, but generally you're going to find a lot of the most popular stuff that you are going to be looking for. You're going to find a wide selection of web browsers, things like Google Chrome, Firefox, Opera. Ironically enough, you can even download Microsoft Edge. You're going to find a lot of really basic utilities, things like email clients, video and music players, note-taking apps, basic drawing programs like Microsoft Paint. And of course, you're going to find a lot of your typical computer essentials, things like Spotify, OBS, Steam, Discord, and whatever you want, really. For the safety and security of your system, sticking to this software center is generally recommended. For example, if you want to download Google Chrome or Spotify, something like that, it's generally better to find it in your software manager and download it from there, rather than opening a web browser, going to the installer page and downloading it there, even if they have a Linux package for it. That's not to say that you should absolutely never download anything from an external source. Just make sure that you're being careful if you do. Just spend a bit of time researching, and if you feel unsure about doing it, maybe ask for some advice. The software manager is also where you're going to do updates, not only for the software that you download from it, but for your entire operating system as a whole. Whenever an update is ready, you'll usually get a notification letting you know that it's available, but again, it's never going to make you do an update, and you can do it completely on your own time whenever you want. But when you're ready to update, all you have to do is open your software center and click the update button, and then just with that one click, the entire system will update all of your software, your apps, even your operating system. And isn't that just kind of nice, It feels like on Windows, every piece of software has its own updater, and then you have to do your system updates separately. And one of the best parts of using Linux, in my opinion, is that you can keep using your system while it's updating. You're not just going to be stuck looking at a blue screen the whole time. You can just press the update button and keep doing whatever you were doing. Oftentimes when it's done, you don't even have to restart because a lot of stuff can just be applied in the background. But with all of that praise being said, nothing is perfect, and Linux is not an exception. I think Linux is great. I think it could be a good fit for a lot of people, but I can't in good faith say that it's a good fit for absolutely everybody. So I just want to talk about a few issues that Linux has that would be important to keep in mind if you are considering switching. But if you find anything to be like a complete and utter deal breaker, I'd still encourage you to wait till the end because there are some solutions that might be able to help you. So this is a big one that stops a lot of people from even considering switching to Linux, and it's that Windows software is not supported. This makes sense. You can't expect like Safari to work on Windows. It's a different operating system. Linux is not Windows. Some software has releases for Linux, but most of it doesn't, honestly. If you are a person that really depends on your computer for use of like the Adobe Creative Suite, Microsoft Office, things like that, other professional industry software, then you're probably going to have some issues with using Linux. There's a couple different ways that you can make Windows software work on Linux, either with like translation layers or emulators, but we're not going to talk about that. That could honestly be a whole video of its own. But if that sounds interesting to you, I'd highly encourage you to do your own research on tools like Wine, Bottles, or Winboat. Your best bet here is to look for Linux-friendly open source alternatives to anything that isn't going to work for you on Linux. For example, if you really use Microsoft Office a lot, I'd encourage looking into LibreOffice or OnlyOffice. These are both great tools that do the same thing as Microsoft Office and fill that gap pretty much perfectly. If you're just like a single user and you don't use Microsoft Office in a team space, I'd even recommend it over paying for Microsoft Office. It's that good. If you're a big user of Photoshop and you do a lot of image editing, then GIMP can be a good replacement for that. If you use it more for like drawing and painting, then I'd recommend checking out Krita. If you are a video editor and you use software like Premiere Pro a lot, then you can check out Kdenlive. It's a great nonlinear video editor that works perfect on Linux out of the box. DaVinci Resolve, a Premiere Pro competitor that you've probably heard of, even has a native Linux port, but it usually takes a bit of tinkering to get it running. Oh, hello, Nori. Hi. What's going on, dude? And that's just a couple of recommendations for a lot of the big pieces of software that tend to hold people back from checking Linux out. But there are so many alternatives to pretty much any piece of software you can think of. If you want to do your own research on it, I'm going to leave a link to a website called alternative2.net. That will be a great resource for finding stuff like that. But with that being said, if there is a piece of Windows software that you absolutely need and that you rely on, Linux might not be for you, unfortunately. But I'm going to have a potential solution for that a little bit later. I talked a little bit before about how gaming on Linux has come a long way and can sometimes even be a better experience than on Windows. And I said that 90% of the most popular games on Steam will work on Linux almost flawlessly. But let's talk about the other 10%. A lot of competitive multiplayer games are not supported on Linux, unfortunately, because of their anti-cheat software, things like BattlEye or EAC. This anti-cheat software runs at the kernel level. If you don't really know what that means, it's basically just running at the level of the computer that is directly, hey, get that out of your mouth. This anti-cheat software is operating at the very, very deepest level of your operating system, the part that communicates directly with your computer hardware to detect if you are cheating. Linux handles this part of the system quite differently than Windows does, so it's not supported on Linux even with compatibility workarounds. There are ways for it to work, but it has to be done on the side of the game developers. For games that don't work, if you try to work around it, you can get your account permanently banned so that you can never play again, even if you move to a Windows system. So if you play a lot of games like Destiny 2 or Valorant, Apex Legends, Fortnite, stuff like that, you won't be able to play them on Linux, unfortunately. You might be able to in the future, and if enough people start playing on Linux, they're going to have to fix it, or they're just going to lose on a big chunk of their market. Hey, stop that. That being said, there are a few rare titles with anti-cheat that are working just fine on Linux, namely the Halo games. If you want to check and see if your favorite games are supported on Linux, I would highly recommend checking out protondb.com. It's the website that I mentioned earlier with the statistic of 90% of the games working. It's basically just a crowdsourced database of all of the games on Steam and their compatibility with Linux. So if you're trying to see if one of your games works, if you want to figure out just how to get them to work, that's the place to go. Now, for the most part, hardware compatibility on Linux is great. It's come a long way from where it used to be, but there are a few cases where you might encounter some problems, namely just if your hardware is very, very new or pretty obscure. There's a good chance that if you try to install Linux on your hardware, be it a laptop or a desktop or whatever, you'll be able to just run Linux and it'll just be perfectly fine. It'll be great. But there's also a decent chance that you might encounter some issues getting things like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to work. Maybe you have like a printer that won't connect and work properly, or if you have a brand new graphics card in your computer, you might have to wait for a bit for support to be added. The good news is that usually you can get these things working. It's just going to take a bit of time, effort, and research, but you should be able to get everything working smoothly. Again, my laptop that I have right here is a Microsoft Surface Laptop Studio, and for the most part, everything works fine. The only thing that didn't really work out of the box for me was like touch input and pen support, because that's just not very common. But there are resources online that make that part of my device work just as well as it did on Windows. I did used to have that actually running. You can see right now, I think you can see a little bit. It's not actually really doing anything. That's just because the Surface kernel isn't maintained very well, so I just decided to just be without the touch input. I don't use it that often anyways, but that's besides the point. But really all I'm trying to say here is that if you have an issue like this, you can usually get it to work just fine. If you're not super tech savvy, it might be a bit of a struggle, but you can always turn to the Linux community for help, and I'm sure that somebody will be able to help you fix your problem. And it might be a bit of a controversial recommendation, but ChatGPT and other LLMs are also great tools for getting Linux support. Now, this is definitely a big one, something I'm honestly a little bit afraid to talk about. I know if any existing Linux users are watching this, putting this in the drawbacks section is going to be basically blasphemy. But the terminal, the console, the command line, whatever you want to call it, is definitely a bit intimidating. The terminal being such a big component of Linux is definitely a little scary, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can help you be very, very efficient and like powerful with the way that you use your computer. But I can definitely understand that it's also not for everybody, especially if you're coming from Windows and don't really have a lot of experience with anything like it. For this reason, I just want to let you know that for the most part anyways, with the distros that I'm going to recommend checking out later, I really think that you can get away without having to use it much. However, just know that at some point or another, you'll probably have to use the terminal, whether there's like something that you want to do or an issue that you have to fix where it's just the easiest way to go about doing it. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons you might have to use it. But if and when this happens, don't let it scare you. That's the biggest thing. Just don't be intimidated by it. When you are using the terminal, I'd really just encourage to really make sure that you're understanding what the commands you are putting in there are doing and what you are accomplishing with it. This will really just be a tremendous help to you understanding why you are using the terminal, and it'll help you be a little bit more confident in using it in the first place. So just as a quick example, let's just say that I want to install a program called TLDR on my computer that's running Linux Mint. If I wanted to do this with the terminal, I would simply open the terminal and I would input this command, sudo apt install TLDR. So let's try and break down what's happening here real quick. So sudo is a command prefix that's basically telling the terminal that I want to run the following command at like a higher level. If you've ever been doing something on Windows and you get a little pop-up that says this following application is asking to run as administrator, this is basically the same thing. Running at this higher administrator or sudo level, whatever you want to call it, is required to do anything that will be adding or modifying system files, and if we didn't use sudo, then we wouldn't be able to install the program. On Linux Mint, apt is what is used to manage software, so it's basically just saying, hey, this command that I'm doing has something to do with software. And then from there, install TLDR is pretty self-explanatory. Once I type in this command and press enter in the terminal, two things are going to happen. It's going to first ask for my password since I am running it with sudo, and then it's going to use apt to pull information about the program, and then it's going to tell me any dependencies it might require and all the information that it needs, and I'm going to just push Y for yes or N for no. And since I want to install this program, I'm just going to press Y and hit enter. The terminal is then going to show us everything that it's doing to install this program so that we can see if there's any errors or anything like that. But once it's done, it's going to just confirm that it was completed and we're free to use the program that we just installed. If you are wondering what exactly TLDR is, well, I did something a little sneaky that's going to help you learn about the terminal. TLDR adds a command to your terminal that helps you learn about other terminal commands. So you can type out
TLDR sudo to learn more about sudo, or TLDR apt to learn more about apt and how these things work and what you would use them for. If you have any desire to learn how to use the terminal and you want to get more familiar with it, this is a very valuable resource to have. I'd highly encourage installing it yourself. If you don't want to use the terminal, then I have good news because we're done talking about it.
My cat keeps coming back here and opening the blinds, and then there's like a big glaring spot on the camera. I just call those blinds, they're curtains.
So if you've gotten this far, I'm sure that one of the questions coming to your mind is, okay, what does Linux actually look like? If you have any kind of pre-existing idea of what Linux is, and especially after we just talked about the terminal for so long, there's a good chance that you kind of have this image in your mind of like a guy in a hoodie, and he's like a hacker. He's in a dark room sitting in his chair with just like a black box and some green text on it. And that's kind of what I thought about Linux, at least before I switched to it and started using it myself. And you absolutely can use it that way if you don't want to have a desktop. But for normal everyday desktop use, it looks like this, or like this, or even this. Yeah, it just kind of looks like a normal everyday desktop computer, just like something on Windows or Mac OS. But unlike Windows or Mac OS, Linux is dang near infinitely customizable. You get a choice in how pretty much everything looks and behaves, and if you want to, you can even switch out your user interface for an entirely different user interface. These different interfaces are called desktop environments, and they provide you with the visual way that you interact with your computer, along with some like basic applications like a settings app, your file viewer, or like your image and music player. And as I stated before, these desktop environments, or simply DEs for short, are completely interchangeable. For example, one of the most popular Linux distros, and the one that I used in my example terminal case earlier, is Fedora. The default version of Fedora is called Fedora Workstation, and it ships with a desktop environment called GNOME, or just GNOME depending on who you ask, and it looks like this. But Fedora also ships with a bunch of different desktop environments, and they call these different versions of it Fedora spins. So I can go to the Fedora website and browse through all of the different desktop environment options that I have and just install whichever one looks good to me. If I change my mind and don't like it and want to try something different, I can even just install a different desktop environment and switch to using that one instead of having to like completely reinstall the operating system. At the end of the day, they're still all the same operating system at their core, they just have a different like look and feel or a different user interface. If we bring it back to our burger metaphor, the desktop environment of your system is kind of like the burger buns that hold everything together. On Windows and Mac OS, you just kind of use the normal burger buns that they give you with the operating system, but on Linux, dude, you have all the choice in the world. You can use a pretty standard brioche bun. You can use like a potato roll. You can switch it out for a lettuce and make it a bit of a healthier option. You can go crazy and use giant grilled onion slices like at the freaking, what do they call it? The Flying Dutchman from In-N-Out. The important thing to remember here is that everything between the buns, or just the core operating system itself, is staying the same. It's not changing at all. But the buns, or the desktop environment, are completely changing how it's like viewed, presented, and experienced. Getting a grasp of this concept early on in your Linux journey is really, really important. It's so helpful because, you know, you're coming from an operating system like Windows or Mac OS where you don't really have the ability to switch out your desktop. So it kind of gives you this impression that your desktop environment and your operating system are synonymous. They're the same thing. And that's a conclusion that makes sense to come to because with these proprietary operating systems like Windows or Mac OS, that's pretty much true. You can't really modify it at all. On Linux, though, that's just not how it works. No matter what Linux distro you choose, you can pick pretty much any desktop environment you want. You can make it look like whatever you want. If you want to switch it out for something different later, you can do that with ease. If you want, you can even have more than one desktop at the same time and choose a different one to log into every time you open your account. But with that being said, the easiest option for newcomers to Linux is to find a distro that already comes with a desktop environment that you like. So for that reason, next we're going to talk about a couple different desktop environments that you might be interested in and a distro that comes shipped with it by default so that you can try it out. So first things first, we're going to get the big one out of the way. When you are a newcomer to Linux, one of the biggest things that people will recommend to you is Linux Mint and the Cinnamon desktop.
And this is not without reason. Linux Mint is a great place to start for a lot of people. On Linux Mint's website, they self-describe their operating system. I'm just going to read this on my screen here real quick. As an operating system for desktop and laptop computers, it is designed to work out of the box and comes fully equipped with the apps most people need. These out-of-the-box apps mentioned are a lot of things that you would expect. It comes with like the LibreOffice suite that we mentioned before. It has Firefox as a web browser. It comes with a email client called Thunderbird, your standard like music, video players, stuff like that. But on Linux Mint, it's also very easy to download anything else that you might need with the aforementioned software center or the like app store kind of thing we were talking about earlier. Similar to Fedora and the different spins that we were talking about just a second ago, Linux Mint also has 3 different versions that each ship with a different desktop environment. But their flagship and the one that they really encourage most people to download is Linux Mint Cinnamon. Mint Cinnamon is a bit of a special case because while you can get the Cinnamon desktop environment on other distributions, it is actually made by the Linux Mint team, so using it with Linux Mint is pretty much how it's intended to be used. The Cinnamon desktop environment is one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reasons, that so many people recommend Linux Mint to beginners, because if you take a look at it, it is quite similar to Windows. It's kind of like a Windows 7 vibe. You have a taskbar on the bottom with the main menu being opened with a button on the left side. You have all your applications in the middle, and then like the time and some system tray icon stuff on the right. The settings on Linux Mint are all quite self-explanatory and easy to navigate. Both application and system updates are handled with a central update manager, and the whole system is just really quite simple. It's very intuitive. This is why it's so frequently recommended, especially to anybody migrating from Windows, because, you know, if you have any experience with Windows at all, you're going to feel pretty at home with Linux Mint. It really makes it a bit easier to give it a quick try if you know that you're not going to feel like you're just dropped into the middle of nowhere. And if you know that that's going to be a good fit for you, then I would highly recommend Linux Mint with the Cinnamon desktop. That's great. I recently installed Linux Mint with the Cinnamon desktop on my grandma's computer, and she hasn't had any issues with it. However, I just want to quickly share something that I learned from my own experience with using Linux Mint. It is the first Linux distro that I tried. I installed it on an old laptop, messed around with it a bit, and I didn't really like it very much. When I was using Linux Mint, I would find myself quickly getting like frustrated and confused, and I think that's just because I understood it to look a lot like Windows, so I felt like it should work a lot like Windows. And of course, this isn't really the case. It's an entirely different operating system, but I would still find myself just like trying to do things the way that I knew how on Windows and then being frustrated when it wouldn't work. As long as you kind of have that understanding that, of course, it's going to look a little bit like Windows, but it's not going to work like Windows, I would still highly encourage giving it a go. It might be a great fit for you. But next, I want to talk about what was a great fit for me.
So next I want to talk about the GNOME desktop or the GNOME desktop, depending on who you ask. I usually say GNOME, but I'm worried I'm going to get made fun of. I have a lot to say about this desktop because it is what I personally use, so apologies in advance if I end up rambling. It's because I kind of am going to do that. So the GNOME desktop is a very different desktop environment to anything that I've ever really used before. It's not a lot like Windows. It's not even a lot like Mac OS either. But it being so different is kind of what I like about it. GNOME is really just kind of doing its own thing, and because of that, I didn't really feel like any of my previous knowledge from using Windows and the little bit of experience that I had with Mac OS was very, helpful in figuring this one out. Because of how different it was, I didn't have any cases of trying to do things and failing at doing those things because they didn't work exactly the way that I knew how. And because of that, I was basically just learning new things. And that might be for you, it might not be. That's okay. You can do whatever you want. But this is just what worked for me, and it's what helped me learn how to love Linux. So GNOME is not super traditional. By default, if you're just using the vanilla version of the desktop environment, you don't have icons on your desktop, you don't have a taskbar or a dock or anything like that. Instead, on GNOME, you have what they call the overview. So what it is you basically just press the super key. On Linux, the super key is just what we call the Windows key, since we're not using Windows, so it doesn't really make sense to call it that. And then your desktop is going to kind of zoom out, show you a big list of all of your windows, and you're going to have a big app drawer full of all of the applications installed on your computer. And along the top, you'll have a search bar where you can search for all of your files, documents, applications, all that stuff. The overview also gives you a quick look at all of the virtual desktops that you have, and that's what I really love about GNOME. If you don't really know what virtual desktops are, it's basically just exactly what it sounds like. It's like having extra screens where you can have your own apps and stuff organized separately to give you extra space for multitasking, just like when you have more than one monitor set up for your computer, except for they're just in your computer instead of actually on your desk. It's a virtual desktop. Sometimes you'll also hear virtual desktops referred to as workspaces, and that's what I'm going to call them going forward, but they're the same thing. This is a feature on Windows and Mac OS too, but did you even know that it was a feature? Because at least for me, I didn't. I don't know what it's like on Mac OS, but on Windows, it really doesn't feel very great. The individual workspaces on Windows are like completely isolated from each other. Moving stuff between them is a weirdly complicated process, and they just don't feel like as like simple and fluid as they are on GNOME. I guess there's a different use case for that, but it's not for me personally. It also kind of feels like a secret on Windows. Like I don't see very many people using this feature on their Windows computers, and the operating system really doesn't like tell you about it or encourage it very much. So even when I was using Windows, this isn't a feature that I used very much because it just kind of felt like an afterthought from Microsoft. But GNOME, on the other hand, is like built around this idea. On GNOME, moving things between workspaces is really easy and fluid, and you'll always know which workspace you're in and how many you have because it's always just shown to you right in the top left. You probably can't see it on the computer where I'm pointing, but it's there, trust me. I personally do not have a desktop computer at the moment. Like I was saying before, this laptop right here is my main computer that I use for everything. I will often use it at my desk right here where it's like plugged into another monitor, and I have kind of my own little workstation like it is a desktop computer, but I also use it on its own all the time. I'll bring it with me to school, I'll bring it with me to work, and I'll just use it just as a laptop. And I'm also a person that does a lot of random multitasking when I'm doing stuff like making these videos, or I have Discord and a game open at the same time. And on a tiny laptop, screen real estate is really, really important to me. So for me personally, using the GNOME desktop kind of feels like magic because the workspaces are just so well integrated that I can just have everything open in its own separate workspace and switch between them effortlessly, and it just kind of feels like I can have all my 1 billion different multitasking things open at the same time without it feeling super cluttered or claustrophobic. That fact alone just really helps with my workflow a lot, and I feel a lot more productive when I'm using this compared to when I use something like Windows. If you feel interested with the idea of using GNOME or at least trying it out, I'd highly recommend checking out Ubuntu. If you are not super familiar with Linux, there's a good chance that you still might know what Ubuntu is, even if you don't know that it's Linux. Ubuntu is incredibly popular, mostly as like a server operating system or other like back-end use cases, but it's pretty popular as a desktop as well. Ubuntu does ship with GNOME by default, but a slightly modified version of it that adds things like desktop icons and a little taskbar kind of thing on the left side of the screen. These features, the desktop icons and the taskbar kind of thing, are added with what is known as GNOME extensions. They're pretty much just smaller user-made applications that let you customize and extend the functionality of your desktop environment. And there are programs that let you manage and find and download these, like the extension manager, for example, and I can use them to do something like download an extension called Searchlight, which basically just takes the overview search bar and turn it into something more like the Spotlight search on macOS. Ubuntu is also a great place to start for beginners because of just how widespread and popular it is. Having such a giant widespread community around this distribution brings some serious benefits, especially if you are a beginner that's not super familiar with Linux. You can go to askubuntu.com and find an answer to almost any question that you could think of, and if you're ever watching or reading a tutorial, there will definitely be instructions specifically for Ubuntu that can make your life a lot easier. So if you feel intrigued by using the GNOME desktop and you want that community support, Ubuntu is a great place to go. Another distro worth checking out is called Zorin OS. It also ships with the GNOME desktop by default, but theirs is pretty heavily modified with extensions. Zorin OS uses these extensions to give you some different themes and layouts of your desktop so that you can pick something that you're a little bit more comfortable with. They have one that's customized to look more like Windows. They have one that's customized to look a little bit more like Mac OS. And there's a few others so that you can find something that's really good for you. Another desktop worth checking out, and the last one that we're going to talk about for now, is called KDE Plasma. Right alongside GNOME, KDE Plasma is probably the most popular Linux desktop, and it's developed by KDE. They are the developers of a lot of other applications that are both on Linux and on Windows and Mac OS as well. Some things that we talked about already, such as Krita and Kdenlive. Plasma is just another project of theirs, and it just happens to be the biggest desktop environment on Linux. If you have ever used the desktop mode on a Steam Deck, then surprise, this is the desktop that you were using. If you're just taking a quick look at KDE Plasma, then you might be thinking to yourself like, this kind of looks like Windows. Cinnamon already looks like Windows, so what's the point of having both of these? And I don't really blame you for that. I actually, when I first was using Linux, thought that Cinnamon and KDE Plasma were the same thing. I didn't realize they were different. But while Cinnamon really focuses on like simplicity and ease of use for newcomers, KDE Plasma has a pretty different approach. If you just leave Plasma as it is, then it can be pretty simple and easy to use. But Plasma, the big thing about it is that it's nearly like infinitely customizable. KDE Plasma can nearly perfectly mimic Windows or even macOS. You can even nearly perfectly copy a different desktop environment that we've already talked about, but that's a bit silly. But I'm really just trying to illustrate how insanely powerful KDE Plasma is in this aspect. If you just give it a little bit of time and effort, you can make your desktop very unique to you specifically. Almost nobody else will have your exact desktop if you use KDE Plasma and customize it. Now, I could spend a whole bunch of time talking about how to customize KDE Plasma and give you a specific tutorial on how to accomplish what you want to do, but I think that half of the fun of it is just kind of figuring that out for yourself. And if you really want, there are videos and documents that you can find online explaining how exactly to achieve a specific customization thing if that's what you want to do. But this video is not a tutorial on how to customize KDE Plasma, so I would encourage you to look elsewhere for that. Instead, I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of the insane things that you can do with this desktop. If you want to try out KDE Plasma, I would highly recommend checking out Kubuntu. It is a version of Ubuntu that just ships with KDE Plasma instead of GNOME. I just want to reiterate real quick, Kubuntu and Ubuntu are the same operating system. They just have a different desktop environment. They just look and feel a little different. If you decide that you want to use Kubuntu, you still get all of the same benefits that you get from using Ubuntu with all of the community support and stuff like that. Now, while I would generally recommend just picking a desktop environment that you like and then rolling with a distribution that comes with that desktop by default, there are a few special cases where I have specific distro recommendations. If you have a computer that has an NVIDIA graphics card, then you might have a little bit of a hard time using Linux. This is because the NVIDIA graphics drivers are not open source, and because of that, a lot of distributions do not include them by default. On almost every distribution, you can get your NVIDIA graphics card working just fine with a bit of effort, but some of them make it very, very seamless and very easy to get it working with little to no effort at all. Luckily for you, I'm pretty certain that the distributions that I recommended just now will all work just fine. Linux Mint has what is called the driver manager that will detect your hardware and download and install anything that it needs for the devices to work properly, such as an NVIDIA GPU. If you decide to install Ubuntu, it'll give you an option to install these needed drivers as you are doing the installation process. And while I haven't experimented very much with Zorin OS myself, from what I read online, it seems to work pretty good. But if you want to download a distribution that you know for sure will just work just fine with your NVIDIA GPU, then you can download Pop! OS. If you have an NVIDIA card, they have a specific NVIDIA image that you can download. There's a similar distribution called Bazite that is built off of Fedora, and it aims to kind of have a Steam Deck-like experience with the dedicated gaming mode and such. And when you are choosing a download image, they will ask you what kind of GPU that you have so that you get the right one that will work for you. If you have an AMD graphics card or don't really know what I'm talking about, then you'll probably be fine just not worrying about it. But if you are worried about it and you just want to make sure that everything in your computer works the way that it's supposed to, Linux Mint with its driver tool is probably the best choice for you. Now, if you are watching this and you are a Mac user that would like to try out Linux or maybe even move to it, then there are some things to note about this process specifically. If your Mac is from 2019 or earlier, then you don't really have anything to worry about. You should be able to use pretty much any Linux distro that you want. But if you know that your device is from 2020 or even more recent than that, then we have a little bit of a special case on our hands. This is when Apple introduced the ARM-based M1 chip, and this is just a bit of a niche hardware situation. As far as I'm aware, there's really only one Linux distribution that will support this well, and it is called Asahi Linux. It is a special distribution based on Fedora that is just aiming to bring Linux support to Apple Silicon. I have never used it for myself because I do not own any Mac computers, but according to the website, it supports almost all of the M1 and M2 devices, and continued support is being worked on in the future. Okay, but now that we have talked about Linux, why you might want to use it, and how to choose a distribution that will be right for you, we're going to talk about actually moving forward in the process and installing it on the computer that you have. But before we do that, I just have a few things that I want to note first. Firstly, you should just give it a try before you fully commit to installing it. If you feel a little bit intimidated or worried about moving forward, either because you're just not sure you're ready to commit, you don't know if all of the software that you need will work, or you don't know which distribution you want to try, then I've got good news for you. Linux has something that I think is kind of like a superpower, and it's that it can run off of a USB drive without even installing anything. Most mainstream distributions, including all of the ones that I've mentioned here, and probably almost anything that you can find that looks interesting to you, will be able to do this. They can give you an entire desktop environment. You'll be able to install and use applications, like the whole shebang, pretty much. It gives you a fully functional system, and you don't even have to wipe your computer or install anything. And this is what is called a live USB. Hello, Tiny. Just sit right here. I don't want you to be walking around on the desk. It's going to be disruptful to my viewers. The live environment that you have on your USB is usually the first thing that you're going to encounter during the install process, and it is the perfect place to just give Linux a quick try and see if you like it. You can just load Linux Mint onto a flash drive and give it a quick go and see if you like it. You can try out GNOME or mess around with KDE Plasma. And as long as while you're messing with it, you just don't do the actual installation process, you're not going to do any harm to your computer whatsoever. Why are you biting that? Hey, stop it. In just a bit, when we get to the actual installation guide, I'm even going to show you how to put more than one Linux distribution on a single flash drive so that you can just swap between them and try out a couple different things with ease. And again, if you don't end up liking what you decided to try, all you have to do is just turn off your computer, pull out the USB, and you can just boot back into Windows like nothing even ever happened. This is also a great place to make sure that all of your devices work properly. So make sure that your mouse and keyboard are working properly, make sure that Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are working out for you, and anything else that you plug into your computer and use pretty frequently, just try it out real quick, make sure it works. It would just really suck if you installed Linux and then you found out a couple months later that you have like a racing wheel or a MIDI keyboard that's not working properly for some reason. It's much better to get these kinds of discoveries out of the way early on so that you don't feel like you're trapped when you find out something isn't working. And if you do find out that something that you use is not working, this is the best time to do a little bit of research and see if there's a way to fix it. Just keep in mind that if you do spend a lot of time in this live USB environment, either customizing your desktop, installing and logging into websites and stuff like that, just remember that if you do decide to go through with the installation, nothing is going to be saved. Just kind of think of it as like a quick demo experience that resets every time you're done with it. If you customize a bunch of stuff, install all of your apps, log into all of your websites, just remember that even if you do install it, nothing is going to transfer over from that live environment to your installed version of the operating system. And for what we are doing today, which is just installing the operating system, this is pretty much all you are going to use a live USB for, but it's pretty handy to keep one of these on you. If for whatever reason your operating system breaks and you can't boot into it, using a live USB gives you a safe way that you can interact with your computer in a functional version of the desktop. Live USBs can even be pretty handy for using Windows computers. Pretty recently, one of my friends had their password to their Windows account changed, and I was able to use a live USB of my distribution to sign into the computer and change the files that I needed so that they could log into their account again. I didn't have to install Linux on their computer or anything. It just gave me a way to interact with the computer and get access to the files that I needed so that they could log in again. Isn't that just kind of neat? And lastly, before you go any further in the process, absolutely make backups. When you're doing something like this, making backups is never a bad idea. In the unlikely event that you have anything going wrong during the installation, it would be really, really sad if you lost everything. So let's just make sure that we're not going to do that. Making backups really does not have to be a complicated process. All we have to do is just take the files that we want to keep and move them somewhere else. If you have a cloud storage account, something like Google Drive, OneDrive, or even Dropbox, it's very easy to just drag and drop all of your files onto there and then very easily download them again later if you need to. If you don't have cloud storage, you can also get external drives for pretty cheap, something like this, or even just a USB flash drive if you don't have very much to transfer over, and then all you have to do is plug it in and drag everything over to that drive. If you want to go any further into this process, please make sure to do this first. Again, it is pretty unlikely that anything will go wrong, but if it does, I really don't want you to lose anything. That'd be so sad. Once you've got everything stored somewhere else safely, we'll move on in the process. So earlier when we were talking about Windows software and how it doesn't really work on Linux, I mentioned there being something that can help you still move to Linux while still being able to use the Windows software that you rely on, and that is dual booting. What dual booting does is it lets you install and use more than one operating system on the same computer. So if you are somebody that has a lot of Windows software or games that you rely on, but you still kind of want to give Linux a try, this is the way to go. Once it's set up, when you turn your computer on, you will just be presented with an option of which operating system that you want to choose. All you would have to do is just use your arrow keys to choose the right one and then press enter, and you'll be booted into either Linux or Windows. I used to use my laptop in a dual boot setup with Windows every day, and I would spend almost 95% of my time in Linux, and then I would only switch to Windows when I had to work on editing these videos. I don't do that anymore. I got DaVinci Resolve to work, thank goodness. But my point is just that dual booting was very helpful for me at the time, and it can probably be very helpful for you if you are in a similar situation. So now I'm going to try and show you how to dual boot real quick, but again, before you go into this process, even though this should be the safest way to do it and nothing should go wrong hypothetically, please make some backups first. So if you are like me and you are on a laptop or just a computer that only has one drive in it, we are first going to have to partition that drive so that we have the space to install Linux onto. So first we're just going to turn on the computer and open up Windows like normal. We're going to go to the search bar and we're going to look up disk management. If you get an option that says something along the lines of create and format disk partitions, that is what we are looking for. So once that opens up, you're going to see your disk visualized and split into a bunch of little sections, and we're going to find the section labeled C and then right click on it and select shrink volume. After we click on that, it's going to try and figure out how much space we can safely take away and then let us choose how much we want to remove from that amount. After it's done calculating this, it's going to list 4 numbers. The top one is the total size before shrinking, the second is the size available for shrinking, the third is where we are going to input how much we want to shrink, and then the fourth is the total size after shrinking. So basically what we are doing here is we are looking at the total amount of space that Windows is occupying, and then we're going to see how much of that we can shrink and give to Linux instead. So for example, if we just want to split it 50-50 so that Linux and Windows are taking the same amount of space roughly, we just want to get as close to half of the top number as we can. So once we put in however much we want to shrink and then click the shrink button, we're going to see that section that we were editing get smaller and then a new section appear just called unallocated space. That new space is where we are going to be installing Linux. We're just going to leave it there. If this just seems a little unfamiliar and scary, you really don't have to worry about it. Windows isn't going to let you shrink any more than you can safely get away with, and if you change your mind, you can just as easily give that space back to Windows like nothing ever happened. If you have a computer that has more than one drive in it, then the best idea, if you can, is just to give an entire drive to Linux and an entire drive to Windows. If you are in a situation where you have a new computer that does not have an operating system on it, and you want to dual boot between Linux and Windows, it is very important that you install Windows first and then Linux second. The Windows installation process has a tendency to mess with some things that it probably shouldn't mess with, and it can erase your Linux install. If this section of voiceover sounds a little bit weird, that's because I just finished moving and I haven't really set up a proper space to record stuff yet, so bear with me for this last little section of the video. Okay, so now that we know that we can try Linux out before installing and set up a dual boot, let's go through how to create a live USB and install Linux onto our system. I'm going to go through this process alongside you to show you what it actually looks like. It's a much simpler process than it might initially seem, breaking down into about 5 steps. All you will need to do this is your computer with an internet connection and a working operating system. I'm going to assume that it is Windows, and a USB drive with at least 8 gigs of space, but more is better. Today, I am going to be installing Linux on this dusty old Dell Optiplex 3010 I picked up from a local thrift store for just $15. It has a sticker saying that it was manufactured in 2013 and it shipped with Windows 8, but right now it's running Windows 10. There's a lot of dust buildup on the inside. It even came with a couple of dead spiders and other bugs. That's super neat. And I would just like to thank David for his generous donation. This is a friendly reminder to always wipe your technology whenever it is permanently leaving your possession. For this section of the video, I was actually planning on using the same Dell Latitude laptop from my last video on servers, but that laptop actually completely died between then and now. I'm actually quite devastated about it, so just, yeah, rest in peace, old Dell Latitude. Anyways, let's begin the guide proper. Welcome to Bryce's Tech Tips, the show where my name is Bryce and I give you tech tips. Today's tech tip is that if you have a computer that won't connect to the internet because it doesn't have Wi-Fi and you don't have an easy place to plug it into Ethernet,
you can just take a USB cable and, one second, you can plug your phone into the computer with the USB cable and open the settings and search for USB tethering and turn on USB tethering. And now you will have internet on your computer. And if you're having an issue where you're trying to install Linux or just use Linux on a computer and it's not connecting to the internet, this is probably the easiest way to do it. You can also use Bluetooth if your device has Bluetooth and you don't have a USB cable for some reason. That's the tech tip. This is the end of the tech tips section.
So the first step in this process is we are going to install a tool called Ventoy onto our USB drive. Ventoy is a USB tool that will let us put multiple Linux distributions on the same flash drive for easy testing and switching. So we're going to plug in our USB drive, and before doing anything else, we're going to make sure that we back this drive up just the same way we would back up our computer files, because everything on this USB is going to be wiped. Then we are going to open up our web browser and go to ventoy.net. On the website's top bar, we're going to go to Downloads and click the option ending with windows.zip. Once the download is completed, we're going to right-click on it in our File Explorer and select Extract. Open the file that it creates and double-click on ventoy to disk.exe. Once that opens up, make sure that your USB drive is selected in the drop-down menu and click Install. Ventoy is going to warn you and make you confirm twice just to make sure that you really want to format this device. Please make a backup first. And once you do that, it'll do its thing, and now you have a Ventoy USB. Congratulations! Now that we're done with that, we can open it up in our File Explorer and find a blank USB flash drive. This is normal, I promise, that's how it's supposed to look. What's cool about this now is that we can drag and drop whatever Linux distribution we want onto here without having to install them one at a time. So now all we have to do is navigate to the download page of whatever Linux distro we want, download the .iso file, and drag it onto this empty flash drive. On mine, I think I'm going to throw on Linux Mint, Ubuntu, and Fedora, but you can do whatever you want. Throw all of the distros I mentioned, do just one, do none of them, and just grab one that's interesting to you, whatever. Once you have Ventoy installed on your flash drive with all the distros you want to try on there, we're ready to move on to the next step.
Okay, so now that I have all of those Linux ISOs dragged over to the USB drive, we're just gonna restart the computer, we're gonna leave the drive plugged in, and we're just gonna restart it real quick.
Next step in the process is booting into the Ventoy installation. So we're going to leave our flash drive plugged in, and we are going to turn off the computer and boot into the BIOS. The BIOS is a small program that's built into the computer's motherboard, and it controls really basic things about your computer, including where it boots from. We need to access this so that we can tell it to boot from our flash drive with all of our Linux distros instead of booting from the main drive where Windows is already installed. To do this, we are going to repeatedly mash the BIOS key while we press the power button and wait for the machine to turn on. Which key is the BIOS key, I hear you ask? Well, I can't really tell you for certain because it varies between different computer manufacturers. And because I'm not a creep, I don't know who manufactured your computer. Some computers will tell you what it is while it's booting, but if it doesn't, common BIOS keys include delete, F2, F10, F12, or escape. For this Dell computer that I'm using in this example, it is F2. On my laptop, it's F4. If none of these keys seem to be working for you, you can usually figure it out with a quick internet search.
Okay, so now we are booted into the BIOS. It might also be called the UEFI on your computer. It's the same thing, it's kind of just a newer version. So now we're just going to look for something called the boot order. I think in here it's this one called boot sequence. It could be called any of those things. We're just looking for anything that is similar. And we're just going to find our USB drive. For me, that is this right here, and we're just going to drag it to the top, or I have to use the arrows right here. And then for that should be all we have to do. Sometimes you might have to disable secure boot if that is something that you have. So we're just going to come over here, we're going to open the secure boot setting. We're going to turn this off. Yes, disabling secure boot will reduce the system security. Are you sure? Yes. That's something, it might seem a little bit scary, but as long as you are getting official Linux ISOs from the website, just make sure that you're always on the real website. You should be fine. You shouldn't have to be scared. You're not going to have any malware or anything. Okay, so after that, we're just going to come down here. We're going to hit exit. I'm going to say, yes, I want to save those changes. And it should restart again in just a second. Oh, sorry, that was a big zoom in. We should be booted into Linux on our USB drive, or the Ventoy, I mean, sorry. And there we go. Okay, so now we are booted into the Ventoy. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to show you how to install Linux Mint, but the steps should be similar for just about any distro that you choose. But I'm going to go ahead and choose this. I'm going to boot in normal mode, and we'll have this list of options right here in Grub. I'm just going to go with the top one, Start Linux Mint. And just like that, after a second, I am now back in the Linux Mint desktop, and I have the option to install it up here, or I could just kind of live out of this for a second and see if I like it. It looks like I need to re-enable USB tethering. Remember, I showed you how to do that a second ago. If you need to do that, this is a good time to try it out. Make sure that you can get the Wi-Fi working. But yeah, I'm just gonna plug in my devices, make sure that they work before I continue forward, and then we'll get to installing. Okay, I was actually going to go through and put some stuff to plug in and test out on the computer, make sure that they work, but I forgot that all of my random USB peripherals are currently packed up and at my in-laws' house because I am moving. So we're just gonna go with the install process right now. We'll just come up here, double click on the install Linux Mint icon. Okay, so first things first, it's just going to ask for our language. English is the default, so I'll just hit continue. I'll ask for my keyboard layout, and I'm just going to say it's the same thing. We're going to get this option to install multimedia codecs. I don't know if you'll have this option on every distro, but you will on Linux Mint. It'll explain right here. It's required to play some video formats and properly render some websites. There's no real reason not to do this. If you do skip it for some reason, you can just install them later, but I'm just going to check it and then hit continue. Okay, now we're getting an option to choose our installation type. If we have Windows on here and we want to install alongside it to dual boot, we can choose this option up at the top. I, for one, don't really care about dual booting on this computer. It actually has somebody else's Windows install, so I am just going to choose Erase Disk and install Linux Mint. However, if you want to do dual booting, this is the option that you will want to go with. It's going to tell us the entire disk will be used. That's fine, so we're just going to hit install now. It'll warn us real quick saying, hey, this is really going to happen. It's going to destroy all of the data on here. I don't care about that. You probably want to read through it, make sure that you're not messing something up and erasing your entire Windows install if that's not what you want to do. But I'm just going to go ahead and click continue. It's going to ask where we are in the world. I think this is to get the proper time zone. This is correct for me. I'm just going to hit continue. Now it's going to ask us for our name, what we want our computer to be named, a username, and a password. So I've gone ahead and put in my name, what I want the computer to be called, a username, and a strong password. So it's going to ask if I want to require my password to log in, or if I wanted to just log in automatically. You can choose whatever you want. I'm going to leave it as this option. And we can also encrypt the home folder if you would like to. I'm just going to leave that unchecked, but you feel free to do whatever you desire. And then from there, I'm just going to hit continue again, and this is when the actual install process is going to take place. So this might take a while. Feel free to, get a drink, eat some lunch while it's going, do whatever you want. Come back in a bit, and it should be done. And here we are. Installation just completed. I think that was for me about. I accidentally hit a key with my. Oh. I think I hit the enter key by accident to select the yes option. That is my bad, but it will present you with an option to either continue testing and messing with the desktop, or you could just restart the computer. And I just selected the option to restart the computer, so it's asking me to please remove the installation medium, which is the USB drive, and then press enter, so I will do that. It'll take a second to reboot, and there we are. We're in Linux Mint now. There we go. We're in Linux Mint now. It'll take just a second to get to the login screen, but then we should be able to just put in the username and password that we said earlier. And now we are into the system proper. How exciting is that? I'm going to uncheck this box to show this at the startup of this system, and I'm going to close it, and now I just have my computer. It's just like any other computer. I can do whatever I want with it. However, the very first thing that you should do before you do anything else on a new Linux system is update the system, since probably almost everything will have to update. On Linux Mint, you do that by coming down here to this little shield icon. Oh, I can't get my camera to focus. I'm so sorry about that. This little shield icon, this is the update manager. We're just going to click to open that. It's going to tell us a little bit about what it is. We'll hit OK. And now that that's done, it will detect any updates that need to be installed. It'll show them all to us here. And we will just click install updates. And this might take a while since dang near everything will probably have to be updated. We'll put in our password again, and the update will get going. Wow, Oh, he's so good at this game.
This might take a bit of time as well because dang near everything will have to be updated, but once it's done, you can feel free to go crazy and do whatever you want. Install all of your programs, sign into everything, and get started using a computer that's truly yours. And it's a little bit anticlimactic, but that's about all there is to say. Once you have your computer with Linux installed on it, at the end of the day, it's still just a computer. It does the computer stuff that you need it to do. So all that's really left to do is just to use it. Just, customize it to be the way that you want it to be. Install all of your applications, browse the web, play some games, do whatever you want. It's a computer. But of course, it's also not running Windows anymore. It's running a completely different operating system, and I'm sure that there's going to be a bit of a learning curve or some things that you might not know how to do or some problems that you might encounter that you don't know how to fix. As I said all the way at the beginning of this video, I am not an expert. I'm nowhere near an expert, and after watching this whole video, you probably know just about as much as I do. But if you leave a comment on this video, I will do my best to try and help out as much as I can, or I'm sure that somebody much smarter than me will be able to as well. There are many, many different forums across the internet all about Linux, full of people asking questions and getting answers. If you do a bit of searching online, I'm sure that you will be able to find somebody asking the same question with an answer that will still be very helpful and useful to you. There are also many different Linux communities across like Reddit and Lemmy and the Fediverse as a whole, full of people that are willing to help you out. And with all of that said, I just want to thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's really long. I appreciate you sticking all the way to the end. That's really awesome and kind of you. I hope that you found this to be helpful or informative in some way. That's really what I'm trying to do. So I hope that you learned something. And yeah, I just hope that I get to see you another time sometime in the future. Yeah, later.